Great. Well, it's good to see all of you again. And this will be our last webinar this year. We won't have one in December because of the holidays. And also, I wanted to be sure of the sites realize that uh, our grant with Walmart, this round two, ends in January. And we are in the process of developing our proposal for our third round. They've invited us to submit, and it's going to focus heavily on workforce development. But we're also crafting, especially those of you who are connected to law enforcement, um, we're using the Albany Police Department kind of as a model for uh, inviting, and in fact, the initiative is called Working to Stop Violence. It's a workforce readiness project, working with different community groups around youth employment, looking at the ages 15 to 30. And we'll be doing an event in Albany on December 16th to bring that together. But I've talked to various sites, and also there, Walmart is still very interested in everyday counts on the school chronic absenteeism and keeping youth out of the criminal justice system. And so we're going to be writing a concept paper over the next 2 or 3 weeks that we'll give to our new program officer at Walmart, who has an education background and also a finance background. She's been at the Walmart Foundation for 6 years, and they were very encouraging to us that, especially with the networks that we built and the 14 sites. I actually thought when I talked to her, she was going to say, "Well, you've had 2 rounds of funding. Well done. Good luck." But that wasn't the case. She really invited us for the third round of funding, and so that should be significant. But these things continue to evolve with Walmart, which is a moving target, and we are prepared and looking forward to it. The bad news on that part is that we won't see funding until March, and so the but it should be a significant increase from last year's funding based upon our conversation with them. So hang in there, and we'll be working with you to develop the concept paper and then also develop the full proposal as we go forward. Um, Today's webinar is really focusing on, you should have received the link on the Youth Deflection Community Safety publication. Um, our advisory board, which if you look at the ACT NOW advisory board, as a significant group of leaders and people are very excited about what we found out of the listening sessions. We talked to over 20,000 people, 1,200 rank and file officers in this process, and we were really encouraged by the response that we've got. And I appreciate all of you contributing and the work that you put into the document. Um, I asked Deb Spence, who I've known for years. um, she was formerly at the Department of Justice in the COPS office, Community Oriented Policing, and rose up to the number 2 or 3 position rank in that position. One of the smarter people I've ever worked with, and in large measure because she has also a specialization in medieval English history. So, and we're both medievalists. But she's and the other great thing about Deb that I'd love to tell, she is a ice skater and ice skater judge. And she is phenomenal at it, and she has walked our with us on community policing and other projects. She was our main person at the Department of Justice. Um, don't tell Ron I said that, Deb, on the Office of the President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. She was the person who was the glue that held everything together as we've helped facilitate that process. And so we're glad to have her here. I asked her to work on a media strategy. And what I'm hoping will come out of this, beyond her walking us through the media kit, is that you can locally use this to reach out to local media related to the toolkit. I know John Middendorf is doing that in Oklahoma City and with his media contacts. But she's going to walk us through that process and see how we can use the media toolkit to promote that. But I think as important, when she gave us the document, this is a toolkit that can be used in a variety of media contexts. And I think it's a good learning exercise to kind of revisit what she's put together on the media toolkit. And so I'm Deb, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of ACT Now and this journey with us. We really appreciate your involvement and the leadership. Deb currently is works for 21CP, which we were formerly senior advisors to. I refer to 21CP sort of, I used to refer to it, but it doesn't seem to be that way anymore. The refugees from the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, all the leadership that was involved in that task force. And Deb works for them now and is a consultant and a lead for them. And I learned a long time ago, I think I've said this before, I once introduced President Clinton at a conference that I led, and I asked the advance team for a copy of his resume so I could introduce him. And they said, Mr. Koppel, all you say is Bill Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States. He needs no further introduction. So with that, Def, I'm going to turn it over to you. You need no further introduction. So,
Oh, thanks, Jim.
mhm.
I know Tanner's going to pull up some PowerPoint slides here, so I'll give him a second to do that. I'm really pleased to be here with all of you today, and I was really flattered when Jim reached out about helping put together a media toolkit around the report to the nation, and it was really a fun project for me to work on. So I hope it helps all of you going forward. Um, what I want to do is walk through the toolkit a little bit. What are all the pieces in there? I really hope it can be a long-term game changer for you in your local work. So while it was created to help you share the report from the nation to the nation, it's really also about telling your community's unique story to your local media. Next slide. I know that media outreach can sound intimidating, especially if you've never done it before. But really with this toolkit, what we're trying to do is make it as simple and user-friendly as possible. And by the end of this webinar, hopefully you have practical tools that you are confident you can use immediately, even if you've never contacted a reporter before in your life. And I think the key thing that I really want everybody to keep in mind as we talk is that this is framed around the national report, but it is really primarily about amplifying your local work. And that we tried to make everything as templated as possible so that customization for you and your local committee is easy. And that really at the end of the day, no prior media experience is necessary. And I say that as somebody who fell backwards into communications and media work. It was never what I trained for. It wasn't the job I was hired for. And it can be really intimidating when you start. But once you dive in, it actually is really straightforward. So next slide. Before we get into the toolkit itself, I think it's important to talk about why we want to have a toolkit like this and why we want to do the media outreach. And it's really that when your local newspaper or TV station or radio show covers the work you're doing as part of the ACT Now, several things really can happen. More people learn about youth deflection and your local committee coalition's efforts. This can help other volunteers and partners and supporters and funders find you and help you grow at the local level. Media coverage also is validating, right, to your local community. In their eyes, it's what you're doing is more real because the press have covered it. And really, foundations and donors really do find people to invest in and projects to invest in because of media coverage. And then I think the last piece of it is really that the report to the nation can reach more people. You're not just promoting yourself, you're spreading this important national message. And even though national level media can outreach can be done by ACT NOW, it's the grassroots coming up from all the local communities that is really going to have the most impact in the field, really, and in our communities and in the media. Next slide. And I think one of the really important things to remember is that local media outlets in particular are always, always looking for positive community stories. This type of work that has been done and covered in the Report to the Nation is exactly the sort of things that they are looking to cover. So in trying to get the word out, sending press releases, following up, you're not bothering local reporters. You're actually helping them do their job by putting a story in their laps. All right, so next slide. What do we have in this toolkit? It has 6 main sections, with each one serving a specific purpose. And it's really meant to be a whole toolbox. They all work together, but you can use them individually as you need to. So first, you're going to see a press release template. This is aimed at the report to the nation. But when you look at it, you're going to see sections that are in square brackets. And those are places where you can further customize the press release. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Then there's also talking points to support that. There's an FAQs document that works the same way with things that you can fill in. There's a media contact tracking sheet, and there's also social media ideas that are embedded in this report. And throughout the whole thing, you will see how there's a media outreach guide within ideas and steps that you can take to make use of all of these tools. So I want to really focus on the press release and the distribution strategies, but I will address some of the other sections as we go through. So next slide. So the press release. This is really the starting point, and that's because we've written like 90% of it for you. What you want to do when you look at this is copy it over into a Word document and add your local flavor. You'd be putting in your city and state and the date at the top. There's a section in there for local highlights to describe what exactly you are focused on and some of the things that you've been doing. There's place to add a quote from somebody in your community. This could be one of you. It could be a participant in one of your programs, or some other coalition member. And then you also want to have add a little bit of information about your local organization and how people can get involved. One of the great opportunities with a press release like this is to encourage other people to join your movement. And then at the very bottom, you'll see the space to add your contact information. One of the things you can do with this press release is if you have a local logo that you use when you're talking about your own programs, you can add that at the top as well. But that isn't really necessary. The main point is that it's a clean, easy to read document with all of the relevant information that a reporter would need. So as you go through the toolkit, you'll see tips like how you can keep your quotes authentic and personal. You don't want to sound too formal. You also want to write them the way people would talk, not the way we write. Sometimes we write a lot more formally than we speak. And then when you have all the pieces filled in, you can just save it as a PDF, and now it's ready to send. It doesn't need a lot more added to it, but you do want a little bit of local context, local color, something ideally highlighting a local success story, right? Something that will make a reporter say, oh, I really want to follow up with these people, find out more about what they're doing. Next slide. So when you have a big press release like this, one of the easiest ways to get them out is through large-scale press release distribution services, but those cost money. So also in the toolkit, we talk about ways to get them in front of reporters that take a little bit of your time and energy, but none of your dollars. They can be intimidating to think about. I don't have a PR firm. I don't have a big budget. How do I get out on the wire services? But if we're thinking locally, we don't need that kind of support. Um, Really, the first and best thing you can do is directly email your press release to local reporters. This is free and is surprisingly easy to do. If you look at a website for your local newspaper or your local television station, you can look at articles about things like education, public safety, other community news. The reporter's name is often a hyperlink that goes right to their email. So you can click on their byline. You can just say, um, I wanted to share this press release with you. I thought it might be of interest. Hit send, you're done. The other thing that you sometimes will find if they don't have hyperlinks right to the reporters, you will see pages that have things like news tips or contact our newsroom. Sometimes it's an online form, sometimes it's just an email, but it's the same thing. In this case, it's going to be going to an assignment editor, but you can simply write an email that says, is this something your communities team might be interested in covering? I've attached a press release. Send. Radio stations are the same way, and I will say that public radio stations in particular love to cover community stories, particularly positive community stories. They need content, and sometimes will even give you more space than television or newspapers would, more time even. So just taking a little bit of time on local media websites, you're going to find good contact information and people you can simply send your press release to. The other thing that people often don't think about is that you might know people who know people, as it were, without even realizing it. So whatever type of email list you have in people that have attended your events or work in your coalition, like let them all know that the press release is out. Say, hey, I'm going to share this press release. They might be able to forward it on to people they know who work in media organizations. And that can really help grow that network of coverage without you having to do anything than send that first email. Similarly, like if you have a local website you can posting it on your social media platforms. These are the sorts of things that local journalists will often be watching to look for news releases. And just having it out there in the public space can sometimes find its way to a reporter that you didn't even think to contact in the first place. But really, I think in just letting people know you have a press release, you'd be surprised by how many people have a connection that they've never thought to mention to you before. And it might be that they know somebody that covers the sports beat, but that sports reporter is going to know somebody who covers other community and education and public safety issues. I will say that, there are some low and free basic option press release distribution services, particularly for if you're just looking at a particular local market, things like e-releases and PR.com. I don't talk about them much in the press kit because I actually think these other direct efforts are going to be more successful and more effective for getting local coverage. Getting into the distribution services is really useful if you're trying to get in front of ABC or CBS or NBC, but not so much for your local news. And I think also one of the really important things about talking to radio and television and not just newsprint is that they all have massive websites of written material as well. So they are also print media companies, not just camera. So even if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to send this to a TV station because I wouldn't want to be on television, there's a high likelihood that what they're going to do is use it for content on their print side anyway. So reaching out to all of the local media in your community is the best way to get the story to have some coverage and have people hearing about the work that you're doing. Next slide. So you're also, as you flip through the media guide, you're going to find a media contact tracking sheet. I think this is about, there's two reasons why we provide this. One, it's not meant to be busy work. It really is a strategic tool that can help you. When you're reaching out to different media contacts, it's easy to lose track of who did you send the first email to? Did you hear back from them? Do you need to send a follow-up? So this sheet is basically meant to be a tool to help you keep that organized. It also will show you over the course of a couple weeks what is working or isn't working. Like maybe TV stations aren't responding, but your newspapers are, or your radio stations are. Or you might discover that people that cover education are more interested in what you have to say than the people who cover crime. So then you can focus your energy for future press efforts by having a sense of where was the most interest lying with this aspect. But then the second part of this contact tracking sheet is that when you fill out a sheet and you send it back to Jim, whose contact information is attached to it, you're contributing to the collective learning of all of the sites. So your experience in your community can help other people learn what strategies are working. So if 5 places say, hey, Tuesday morning emails were the winners, I got responses when I sent things out on Tuesdays. That's data everybody else can use, particularly if they weren't getting good response when they were sending things out on Thursdays and Fridays. So that's why that sheet is there. I will say it is set up as a fillable form. You could actually extract the pages out of the PDF and type directly in it. But you also can just use it as a guide and set up whatever tracking system works for you. That could be a spreadsheet, it could be just in a Word document. But the key is the type of information that's on it, and for it to be something that you can do quickly in tracking and that you can send back to help the other sites when everything is compiled. So you'll see it wants you to know, or it wants you to fill out like, what's the media outlet? Who's the person you contacted? What's the date? How did you do it? Did you fill out their form? Did you contact them on a social media DM? Did you just send an email? What is the thing you sent? It's probably just the press release. Whether or not you heard from them, and some sense of the result of, they declined on enough of an angle, they're interested in future stories, they referred you to another reporter, that sort of thing. So it's meant to be very quick to input this stuff, but the idea is it'll help you keep track and ultimately help everybody else learn collectively what has the best reach in communities to get people engaged and interested in your work. The other thing you can do with it is capture details about what is working. Like you might find that reporters come back and they are hoping that you have pictures from some of the Breaking Bad events, for instance, or they want you to know that it's best to call rather than email, or, hey, we cover stories like this on a particular day of the week. So you should contact us at a certain point of time. This is all the sorts of good information that can help you long-term build a directory of local media contacts. Next slide. So, so you send out your press release, you tracked every place you sent it in your media tracking sheet, and a reporter actually reaches back out and says, got your press release. Love to talk to you about it. Sometimes this can actually be a moment of panic as well, because it's like, oh, wait, now I actually have to talk to a reporter. They want to know more than what was in my press release. So that's why in the toolkit, you're going to see a couple other things, mainly a FAQs and talking points document. And much like with the press release, there's a huge part that is templated and applies nationally to talk about programs, but then there's sections where you can add stuff that's specific to your local work. So when you do the customization of a press release, you can actually take a few minutes and customize these other two documents as well and have them ready to go. Sometimes with a reporter, they just want more information, in which case maybe you don't have to participate in an interview. You can just send them the FAQs and it provides them additional information. But sometimes they might actually want to do an interview, in which case now we have talking points that can help you. And the idea isn't for them to be a script that you have to read. They're just meant to help you organize your thoughts before you sit down and talk to a reporter. So it's not about memorizing them. It's just about having a sense of what are the key things that I want to make sure that this reporter understands. Because most likely you're not going to have a long time with them. A newspaper reporter that is following up on an interview for a story like this maybe will talk to you for 10 minutes. If it's a radio station or a television station, it could be 3 to 5, depending on the type of news that they cover. So just having a set of talking points in mind highlighting the ones that you think are most relevant to your local work, adding your own quotes or talking points into them. It just gives you something to focus on when you're talking to a reporter. And I think one other thing that's really important to remember when you're doing an interview with a reporter is that you don't actually have to answer everything perfectly, or even at all. It's totally reasonable for them to ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, and for you to just say, well, that's a great question. I don't have that information. I can maybe find that out and follow up with you later. Um, or to do the thing that we all see, politicians are really good at this, but great question, but the most important thing I want you to know or your audience to know, and then you can pivot to the talking point that you really want to say. Um, you know, the reporters, particularly for stories like this, are not trying to play got you. They're trying to provide you a platform to tell your story and to make your point. So being organized about what is the message that you want to get across can really help you do that in an interview. And most of the time, you're not going to be in a live recorded situation. So the chance to say, I really don't know is totally reasonable. The first time this ever happened to me in an interview was I was very early in my career at the Justice Department. I'd written an article on rising gasoline prices and its impact on police departments. And NPR's Morning Edition wanted to get me on a recorded interview. So we weren't live, but we are on the phone, which means we can't see each other. And the reporter says to me, how does this compare to what police departments faced during the fuel shortage crisis in the 1970s? And I sat there for a moment, totally panicking, trying to come up with an answer, and finally had to concede, I don't know. I was not a sentient human in the 1970s. I had no way of answering that question. And the reporter paused, and then he laughed and he said, I wasn't there either. And we moved on with the interview. So he thought he had a great idea for a question. I didn't have an answer. It was totally fine. That clip does not appear in what you hear on Morning Edition if you were to go back and laugh. So it was just simply entertaining to both of us. And probably he would not have answered it if we had had Zoom at the time. It would have been a lot more obvious that neither one of us knew. Anyway, so at the end of an interview, always really important to ask when the story might run, offer to give them any media that might be helpful to them, like if you have photos from events. And it's often really nice to follow up with a thank you email. But the best thing that you can do is if they do publish something, share it on your social media channels and tag them in a thank you. Because then not only will your story be seen by more of their followers, but it also lets them know that you appreciated the time that they took. Next slide. Is it going to flip? There we go. All right. The toolkit also has a big section on social media and amplifying your message across different platforms. And they're kind of divided into things that are like announcement posts around the report, other types of quote graphics that you could create into things that look great, like for Instagram, using free tools or making use of your own behind the scenes photos and thank you posts and things like that. Everything that I've included in there are meant to be examples of what you can write. I find that when I'm doing social media for an organization, I hate staring at the blank prompt. So these are really meant to give you some inspiration. You can certainly copy and paste them, but it's also just a chance to say, oh, I kind of like where that's going. I'll write something like that, but it's in our voice or in my voice. And speaking directly to our usual followers and trying to figure out how to help grow them. I think the main things that we're trying to get at in the section is to make sure that you're making use of hashtags and tagging your partners, tagging media outlets locally and reporters to try and draw their attention to your work. But so there isn't anything in this section that is like, oh, you must send these posts. It's really just meant to be inspiring to you and get your creative juices going about how you can amplify this report and the work that you're doing through social social media channels, because not only does that help spread your message directly to your community members, it's really helping you get noticed by reporters who are out there looking for story ideas. Next slide. So I think this is kind of getting to a conclusion, but I wanted to just go over sort of what I have heard over the years from staff that I've worked with and organizations I've worked with that are nervous about getting started in the media space. And often it's things like, I've never done this before. What if I mess it up? Or what if nobody responds? Or, what if they ask me something I don't know? And I think that's what I'm really trying to address with this toolkit and giving you these options and things that you can fill out and customize. It's meant to help be mess up proof, if you will. And you can really start with one reporter at one local newspaper and see where it goes. And you don't need to email 50 all at once. You can try a couple, and if you get a really good story out of it, well, then that's a success. You can move on to the next thing you need to do. And sometimes you won't get a response right away, and that's okay too. Follow up emails or phone calls can work. Sometimes reporters are just really busy. The toolkit talks about how Tuesday late mornings can be one of the best times to get a hold of editors and reporters. It tends to be the slowest part of their week, but maybe something really big happened the day you sent out press releases and it just got buried at the bottom of the list. There's no harm in following up a week later to say, hey, I just wanted to make sure that you saw this. You can also try a different reporter within the same organization if you want. And then, I think the other thing that people worry about is like, is my story really newsworthy? And I think yes, resoundingly so. I think reading the report to the nation is inspiring, and I think you should want to be telling that work to your local community and having them feel that there's an opportunity to be a part of it. So these sorts of smaller, local driven stories can have a bigger impact than what the national news media can cover. So it's worth the time to try and make those connections to local press and get some of this information out to them and see where that relationship can go. And it really can be the start of a relationship. Reporters love to follow up on things. So even if you're at a very early stage in a project, they might see this as an opportunity to tell the beginning of a journey story, and then they're going to keep track of you over time and want updates going forward. And then you have repeated press helping you achieve your goals. So next slide. So here, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what are the first action steps you can do and in between now and Christmas, right? Where do you start? Well, you can read through the whole toolkit. Shouldn't take you terribly long. You can decide who's going to be your main media person that's going to do this outreach. Maybe it's you, maybe it's a colleague. You're going to then, within the next week, you should be able to customize that press release and identify maybe 3 or 5 local reporters that you want to try and contact. You can send them all the same email. They're not going to compare notes. And then once you send that press release out to the reporters, you can put up some social media if you have that to say the press release is also out. You can push it out to your coalition members to distribute amongst their own networks. Give the reporters about a week and then send them another email and say, hey, just following up. And then as you work through this, of course, you're going to be filling out your tracking sheet. And after a couple of weeks go by and you've had a chance to see what has worked and what hasn't worked, you're then going to send your tracking sheet back to Jim so that he can then share lessons learned from all of the sites with all the other sites. Next slide. So I guess just sort of a final thought, and then I'm happy to take questions. I know this is a lot of me talking all at once. But I just want to say that I think, this is not just about promoting the report, even though that's the foundation of the toolkit's creation. It really is about elevating the incredible work that you're all doing in your local communities and showing your community that investing in youth is a public safety strategy. And the other thing you might be doing is you might be giving hope to other communities who want to start similar work and grow this network, right? So the last thing that you'll see in the toolkit way at the back is, you know, what if I'm stuck? What if I don't know what to do? You can always reach out to Jim, and if it's not an answer that he can give, he knows how to get to me. And there really are no silly questions. The important thing here is that your stories matter, your communities need to hear it, and local media are the sort of people who want to tell it. So hopefully this toolkit is everything you need to make that happen. And thus ends my lecture. So if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer.
Great. Tanner, if you could pull down the slides and then, yeah, thank you. Any questions? Um, this is very helpful. Well, Deb, let me start off with one. Uh, Over the years, I've discovered that local journalists, today they may be covering a criminal justice issue, tomorrow they're covering an environmental issue. They're just all over the map. They're not subject matter experts. And so, to what extent should that impact how we relate to a journalist? I mean, I always found it important to let them know that in my area, substance use field or criminal justice field, that I was in their, used to be a Rolodex, but I was in their database. They could reach out to me for background on another story. I was a source for them. Could you speak to that?
I think that's exactly right. A lot of local news reporters are not, they might cover a beat, but that doesn't mean that that's really what they know. It might have just been the job assignment that was open. Um, and so I think that's why the relationship building with them is so important, that over time they will become people that they might call you for something else. And while they have you, be like, hey, is anything exciting going on? And you have expertise in topics that you might say to them, okay, this isn't about my work that I'm doing right now, but you should also know that this is happening over here, and you might want to look into that as well. So sometimes it's okay if a reporter doesn't pick up your story in the first instance. They might say, I don't really have anything I can do with this press release. But if they at least will engage with you a little bit about what you about the larger work that you're doing, and you can build that connection, they then become somebody that you can call or that they can call. You, as you say, wind up in the Rolodex, which I guess is now an address book. And finding the reporter that, even if they don't know, is a lot about the subject matter, but is interested on a human level, like you can maintain that relationship over time, even as they move around different beat assignments, and they become people that can connect you to other reporters.
Any other questions?
So, Deb, I was wondering, sometimes when I look through the newspaper, titles attract my attention or a picture attracts my attention. What's your thoughts about that when we write a press release? If you were writing one, how would you start that? What would you do?
I think that is a really great point. Over the years, I've joked that I sort of hate writing titles. I feel like the pressure to get the title right, whether it's for a session or a press release or a book or an article, is I sometimes feel is worse than writing all the content behind it. Um, I will, this might sound funny, but one of the things that I think is a game changer in this space is AI. You know the content that and the point you want to make, and you can quickly go into one of, like a chat GPT, and just be like, give me some title ideas around this. You can give them here's my really boring title, and say, I want something that sounds more like marketing, or more eye-catching, or more active voice, or something like that. And it'll spit out, you can ask for 5 or 10, it'll give you as many as you want. And then you can actually pick, like, oh no, that one is the one that sounds like what I want. So like, as somebody who does a lot of writing for a living, it feels weird to say, but AI can help you with this. But AI can help you with this. So it's very much a place where you can, to just ask it for a title with no context is meaningless. But when you actually have the context of that message, and you say, I need help writing a title for this, I think that's where it's a really powerful tool that can help you save a lot of time of just staring at the screen going, I don't like any of these.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, curious, since we're doing this at our local levels, in our regions, is there also going to be a push at a national level trying to engage some of the bigger press?
Yes, there is. We're going to do something around the first of the month for Thanksgiving, pre-Christmas, and we'll also probably do something again in January. And the president usually submits his budget in February, early February, and we'll probably speak into that process at that time as well. So
Great, good to know.
And I sort of assume this, Jim, but I would think that when you have the press releases that are going out nationally, you would also be letting all the local coalitions know, so that then becomes something that you could do in a local press outreach, is also refer to a national press release or story.
It's been a while, Deb, since I've needed to be overly conscious about press. But in terms of the changing technology that journalists are using or access, uh, I used to think that, or I recently thought that press releases were sort of outdated, but or that they could be too long and not read. um, in terms of how you engage the press release specifically.
So one thing that's interesting is I feel like I would have agreed with you 6 or 7 years ago.
Mhm.
But now, with so much web content being driven by all types of media, one of the things that I'm noticing more and more is that we push out a press release, and suddenly, now we're pushing out national press releases, right? But suddenly 75 local television stations pick it up and just run it on their website as a story. We've never been contacted by a reporter. They have written no original language. They are simply saying, great, here's content. And boom, it's up on their site as a news story. So I think that's why, even with the template press release in here, I didn't aim for brevity. It's giving them everything they would need to write a story, even if they never contact you back.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, it's nicer if they contact you back and you can build that relationship for future work. But it is interesting that I feel like the press release was dying there for a while, and now it is like, oh, you have now saved them a ton of work. Here's a ready to go story.
Yeah.
I'd like to add a couple of comments. Can you hear me? Did I do it?
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned back in the 70s and 80s when I was running our substance abuse coalition was that the greater coverage we received was when we used the youth voice, when we had a young person or a young group not only listed in the press release, but also as part of the press conference. And in the invitation or the release that gave details about the press conference, to list who's going to be speaking, because they love the voice of youth. And then the other thing that we had the fortune of having was a youth committee. And our youth committee would then go out to schools and go to community meetings and so forth, and always with adults. And part of our partnership, we didn't send them out alone, and we didn't want to send them out alone. But we really put a lot of emphasis and priority on that. And the other thing that I was thinking, and I used to use this a lot, is that if we didn't have a big event going on, or there wasn't any new data news or something like that, that we would regularly honor people and honor them in a very public way. We had Oh, we had committees that were covering every sector of the community, but our schools committee, we would honor one of the biggest schools superintendents and list the things that that person had been doing. And we got great coverage that then leads to another thought that I had is to remember what I call alternative media, school newsletters, agency newsletters, and you did already talk about websites, church bulletins. I mean, that's a good place to get in because people take their bulletins home with them because it's got dates in there. But if you've got something about your partnership, then they're going to have that right there at their home.
That's a
So,
great point. My community has a newsletter and they go begging for stories.
yep, yeah. Oh, and we had the fortune, this is my last thing. We had the fortune of having a media committee. And that media committee consisted of anchors of our ABC, NBC, other BCs, and also radio, especially public radio. Sometimes public radio gave us our best stories, our longest stories, and our longest lasting that may have lasted over even a month. And we would do a new story each week or whatever. So that was the other point I wanted to make.
I think that's a really important point. I didn't put this in the guide or really even in the presentation, but I was I just read a piece recently on public radio stations and some of their the loss of federal funding and what it means, and how there's some in the country that it's maybe only 2 or 3% of their total budget is lost, but in some of rural communities it can be upwards of 60 and 70%. And the story was talking about how many public radio networks, particularly in rural communities, are the primary source of news coverage and connection in those communities. And they talked to one who's like, he's like the station manager and the news director and the on-air guy that reads all that. Like he's literally like one guy keeping this station together, but it's a passion project for him and really important to the community where he works. And that they are, if I was going to start anywhere, if I really didn't know where I wanted to try and tell my story, I would be starting at public radio. I think they're the ones with the most time and the most locally focused mission. And you can find yourself very quickly into long conversations with public radio reporters where other people might just ask for a clarification on a pronunciation and go about their day.
Another thing to keep in mind out of some couple of bad experiences, never assume anything is off the record.
Yeah.
That you can say this is for background, and if you trust the reporter, that's good news. But if you've first time contact, if you're providing background or and you're wanting to be off the record, um, hope that it is. So
I think that's why it's important to always be really clear if you don't know.
yeah.
Like rather than to try and fudge an answer.
The other is that I think an important thing is oftentimes when you establish a relationship with media and they're calling you, if you're talking to a journalist, uh, give it time. Don't rush through it. Because that's when you can get misquoted or misunderstood. And it's really important that you focus and be deliberate in your responses, and clear.
And if it's print media, you can always ask to review, can I review any quotes before you print? Like, I mean, there are stories in which they might be like, no, but that's unlikely in this context. That most likely if you ask to, if you're going to use a quote of me, can you please check it with me before you run it? most of the time they're going to say yes. They might not be able to give you a very long period of time, but you know, it's in both your interests to.
Yeah.
And related to that, Jim, I wonder if there might be some potential areas of misunderstanding that we might want to share with the group so that they kind of already have an idea. You know, I can see this in this polarized environment. I can see it being there being a few areas that we want to be really clear about and make sure they aren't miscommunicated. Is there anything in particular that you think would be helpful to make sure that we're always super clear about?
The thing I was concerned about the report, I was concerned about this project was because it was born out of the murder of George Floyd, and that the listening sessions initially were focused on police reform. That we came off, or the worry that we would come off anti-police. And to be sure, there were issues that we identified, and there were concerns that were being raised out of our listening sessions. But and Walmart particularly was concerned. And in fact, Walmart sort of got out of the police reform business very quickly. They appropriated $125 million to invest post George Floyd for the first year and a half to two, but just the pushback that many of their grantees were communicating regarding the police made them very uncomfortable. And it's so this report really reflects the fact that we talked to 1,200 line officers in the course of the project, gave it credibility, and with police agencies. I probably have had maybe a dozen communications from police chiefs or police leaders who I've worked with over the years in various contexts, who I sent the report to, who liked it, and also a couple of research groups. Debs, you appreciate this. Barry Friedman sent me a long letter loving this report. It's like, well, okay. So he's with the NYU Policing Project. Anyway, I think that is one area. And the other is the diversity issues around the different people that we talk to. We talk to Native Americans, we talk to African Americans, we talk to all segments of the society or community. And being sure that we had that representation was really important. And also the concerns about DEI in terms of we were worried throughout this project that we were viewed as being too woke by our funders. But it is what it is when you're doing listening sessions. So,
I think to try and help that, in the toolkit, you'll see that with the talking points section in particular, Jim and I probably spent the most time talking about that. What is the angle that would be most helpful so that you don't accidentally fall into a pothole? So we try in that section in particular to give you some ideas of what is a positive direction to move the conversation in, so that you don't maybe wind up in some sort of confrontational conversation about like I said, in a polarized world.
So anything else before we wrap up? Daryl, are you talking?
Jim, if I could just say, I found they're always hungry for press releases specifically, and forgive me if this has been covered already. I did have to jump off for a minute or two. But in building and reporters move around, especially these days, like crazy. Many, of course, have their own little thing going on. But in building a relationship with them, the overarching goal is to have them see you as a source, so that they're calling you instead of you constantly reaching out to them. And with print media, especially, the first question you might want to ask is, especially if you don't know the answer to something, or you can be more of a source to them, what's your deadline? So that they know that you know their main concerns, which is just getting reliable information on time. That's kind of their whole job. So if you can help them do that ongoing, they're going to be calling you more than you really want. That's all I've got.
It's a very good point. It's interesting when probably a year into when I started Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, we did two national media summits, one on the East Coast and on the West, where we brought coalition leaders together with major media because media wanted to kind of inform us that just because you send us a press release doesn't mean we're going to print it, and understand what their challenges were. And then at the same time, it was an opportunity to educate the media about the issues of substance use. And those two summits, Knight Ridder newspapers particularly was a big sponsor of that initiative. And they're the ones that sort of introduced us to the fact that good news sells newspapers as much as bad news. And no longer putting newspaper stories on page 6, but good news stories being on page 1 actually sells more newspapers. So, I was quoted once in Rolling Stone magazine, and I bought 20 magazines. Daryl, did you have a comment?
I did have a quick one, Jim, which was basically don't allow yourselves to be ambushed. I can't tell you how many times I would show up at my office and there's a camera crew there with a reporter and they want a statement. And I would always say, I cannot give you a statement at this time. I have a commitment, but if you want to be here an hour from now, I'll be glad to speak with all of you. And then I would go down to my office and convene our executive committee and say, what are they going to ask me? What are the worst questions they're going to ask? And what's our best response to them? So we were better prepared, but they will ambush you and try to get you to make a comment immediately.
The other thing is good practice is particularly with national media, um, is once the story has run and they've interviewed you and no harm is done, I will call the general manager of the station or an editor and say, "This was a great interview. They did a great job. I really appreciate the way you covered it." And uh, it's interesting. I had that relationship with CBS Morning News when I was doing a project with iAtlas, and uh, it was they now call me still for background or information. Um, and it was after being on air and then just affirming the fact that the producer did a great job of setting the thing up and putting it together. So sending a note saying it was good work.
Yeah, I have a similar experience with USA Today. Had a crime reporter that picked up something from one of our agency newsletters, and we reached out to say thank you. Like, we were flattered. And it turned into a decades-long relationship where when there was a national crime story, he would reach out and ask us our opinion, often for background or off the record, sometimes looking for quotes, but
Yeah.
um, we wouldn't have gotten that if we hadn't expressed our appreciation for
Yeah.
the first
Exactly.
coverage.
Well, thank you, Deb. Appreciate it. This was very helpful. And a recording of this and will be sent out to everyone. And we appreciate your involvement. Again, there won't be a webinar in December, and we will be in touch and following up with you, particularly as we develop the concept note and the proposal for the next round of funding uh, for uh, for Walmart. And we have also a conversation taking place with the Skoll Foundation, which I'll be following back up with several of you related to that. So, okay. Any last comments or questions? If not, have a great holiday. Have a great
Happy
Thanksgiving and
Thanksgiving.
Christmas and Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Thank for the invitation. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
care, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks.